Pay attention to the news footage captured on Highway 90 in Lafayette, Louisiana. You're looking at a massive crocodile, 18 feet long, over 2,000 pounds, bound with heavy ropes and restrained on the asphalt. Wildlife officials and police officers surround it, phones out, documenting this absolute monster of a reptile. Look at the size of those jaws, the thickness of that tail. This is not a Louisiana alligator. This is something that shouldn't exist anywhere near these waters. Watch the officers' faces. They're not just amazed, they're disturbed, because they already know what's about to be discovered. Inside this creature's stomach, veterinarians are about to find something that will transform this wildlife story into a homicide investigation. Human remains, a wedding ring, and a mystery that will unravel into one of the most bizarre murder cases Louisiana has ever seen. This crocodile isn't just evidence, it's a living, breathing murder weapon. And the story of how it got here will reveal a crime so calculated, so cold-blooded, that it rivals the predator lying on the highway. You know that feeling when someone you trust turns out to be someone you should have feared. For Marcus Renfrow, that realization came too late. Way too late. Marcus was 34 years old in the spring of 2020, living in Lafayette, Louisiana, with his wife Kelly and their 2 kids, 7-year-old daughter Emma and 5-year-old son Tyler. He was a construction worker, built like one too, 6'2", strong from years of physical labor, the kind of guy who could handle himself in most situations. Marcus and his business partner, Dale Hutchins, had been running Renfrow-Hutchins Construction together for 5 years. They'd started small, residential renovations, deck builds, bathroom remodels, and gradually built up to bigger commercial projects. The business was doing well, not making them rich well, but solid. Steady work, good reputation, growing client base. On the surface, Marcus and Dale seemed like the perfect partnership. Marcus handled the actual construction work and client relations. He was personable, good with people, the face of the company. Dale managed the books, handled permits and regulations, dealt with the business side. Different skill sets, complementary roles, should have worked perfectly. But behind the scenes, something had been rotting for months. Dale Hutchins was 41, never married, lived alone on a 20-acre property about 15 miles outside Lafayette. The place was isolated, down a long gravel road, surrounded by swampland and cypress trees, the kind of property where you could do pretty much anything without neighbors noticing. And Dale had been doing things his neighbors definitely shouldn't have noticed. He collected exotic animals, not cats or dogs. We're talking about dangerous, illegal wildlife. He'd been smuggling reptiles and birds from Southeast Asia for years, keeping them in custom-built enclosures on his property. Pythons, monitor lizards, rare birds. And his prize possession, the thing he was most proud of, an 18-foot saltwater crocodile he'd illegally imported from Indonesia in 2018. Marcus had known about Dale's collection. He'd been to the property, seen the animals, thought Dale was crazy but didn't really care as long as it didn't affect their business. But in early 2020, their partnership started falling apart over money. Marcus discovered discrepancies in their accounts, funds that should have been there but weren't. Contract payments that Dale claimed they'd never received, but Marcus had documentation showing otherwise. Marcus confronted Dale in March. They had a heated argument at the office. Marcus accused Dale of embezzling from their company. Dale denied everything, got defensive, aggressive. Marcus told him he wanted out. He wanted to dissolve the partnership, split the assets, go their separate ways. Dale refused. He said if Marcus tried to leave, he'd make sure Marcus got nothing. The threats escalated. Marcus told Kelly he was thinking about going to the police, not just about the money, but about Dale's illegal animal operation. Maybe that would give him leverage. Kelly begged him not to. Just walk away, she told him. Start over. It's not worth it. But Marcus was stubborn. He'd put 5 years into building that business. He wasn't going to let Dale steal from him and get away with it. On May 19, 2020, Marcus told Kelly he was meeting Dale one last time to try to work things out. "I'm going to his place," Marcus said. "We're going to settle this like adults. If he won't be reasonable, I'm going to the cops tomorrow." Kelly watched him drive away around 6 p.m. It was the last time she'd see her husband alive. When Marcus didn't come home that night, Kelly wasn't immediately worried. She figured he and Dale had talked longer than expected. Maybe Marcus had stayed for a beer to smooth things over. But when morning came and Marcus still wasn't answering his phone, Kelly started calling, straight to voicemail. Every time. She called Dale. He answered on the third ring. "Hey Kelly, what's up? Is Marcus still at your place?" "Marcus? No, he never came by yesterday. I was waiting for him, but he never showed." Kelly felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean he never showed?" "He left here at 6 saying he was meeting you." "I don't know what to tell you," Dale said, his voice concerned. "I was here all evening waiting. He never called, never showed up. I figured he'd changed his mind." Kelly called Marcus's friends, his brother, anyone who might have seen him. Nobody had. By noon on May 20th, she filed a missing person report with the Lafayette Police Department. Detective Sarah Chen caught the case. 38 years old, 12 years on the force, she'd worked dozens of missing person investigations. Most of them ended with the person turning up fine, gone on a bender, crashed at a friend's place, needed space from family drama. But something about this one felt different. Marcus Renfrow wasn't the type to just disappear. Stable job, loved his family, no history of mental health issues or substance abuse. His car was found 3 days later in a grocery store parking lot about 5 miles from Dale Hutchins's property. No signs of struggle, keys still in the ignition, wallet and phone gone. Chen interviewed Dale Hutchins on May 23rd. He came into the station voluntarily, seemed cooperative, concerned. "Marcus is my partner," he said. "My friend. I'm worried sick about him." "You were supposed to meet him the night he disappeared?" "Yeah. We've been having some business disagreements. Marcus wanted to talk about potentially dissolving the partnership. I was willing to discuss it, but he never showed up." "Did you try calling him?" "A few times that evening. It went to voicemail. I figured he'd changed his mind, decided to cool off for a few days before we talked." "When was the last time you actually saw Marcus?" Dale thought for a moment. "Maybe a week before he disappeared? We ran into each other at a supplier's warehouse. Brief conversation. Nothing significant." Chen made notes. Something felt off about Dale, but she couldn't put her finger on what. He seemed almost too calm, too prepared with his answers. Over the next 2 months, the investigation stalled. Marcus's phone records showed his last outgoing call was to Kelly at 5:47 p.m. on May 19th, telling her he was almost at Dale's property. After that, the phone went dark, either turned off or destroyed. His bank account showed no activity, no credit card charges, no social media posts. Marcus Renfrow had simply vanished. Kelly held on to hope as long as she could. She posted on Facebook, distributed flyers, organized search parties. But as June turned into July and July into August, even she started to accept the possibility that Marcus might not be coming home. Then came August 23rd, and everything changed. 2 fishermen, brothers named Tom and Rick Broussard, were fishing near the Highway 90 bridge over the Vermilion River when they spotted something that made them drop their rods and scramble for shore. A massive crocodile, not an alligator, a crocodile, was swimming in the river, and it was behaving aggressively, thrashing in the water, moving toward them with clear intent. "That thing was huge," Tom would later tell reporters. "Biggest reptile I've ever seen in my life. And it was fast. We got out of there quick and called wildlife control." The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries responded, along with local police and a team of exotic animal specialists from Baton Rouge. What they found was unprecedented: an 18-foot saltwater crocodile, a species not native to Louisiana, swimming in Louisiana waters and displaying highly aggressive behavior toward humans. "This animal shouldn't be here," said Dr. Michael Torres, a herpetologist who was part of the response team. Saltwater crocodiles are from Southeast Asia and Australia. They don't survive in Louisiana's ecosystem. The fact that this one was not only alive but apparently thriving was extraordinary. The operation to capture the crocodile took 6 hours. They used nets, tranquilizer darts, heavy ropes, and about 20 people working in shifts. The creature fought the entire time, nearly capsizing 2 boats and injuring 1 wildlife officer who got too close to its tail. Finally, they managed to secure it with ropes around the jaws and body and transported it via trailer to a secure facility. The crocodile was laid out on Highway 90 for documentation and measurement. News crews arrived. People stopped their cars to take photos. It was bizarre, a monster from another continent captured in Louisiana, creating a traffic jam as people gawked at it. Dr. Torres and his team wanted to understand how this animal had survived in non-native waters. They decided to perform a necropsy, essentially an autopsy for animals, to examine its stomach contents, check for diseases, understand its condition. What they found stopped everyone cold. Inside the crocodile's stomach, partially digested but still identifiable, were human remains, a section of torso, a femur bone, some rib fragments, and lodged in the digestive tract, a gold wedding band with an inscription inside, MR and KR Forever, June 12, 2010. Dr. Torres immediately contacted the Lafayette Police Department. "You need to get detectives out here. We've got human remains inside this animal." Detective Chen arrived within 30 minutes. She looked at the remains laid out on the examination table, looked at the wedding band, and felt her pulse quicken. She photographed the ring, zoomed in on the inscription, and ran it through the missing persons database. Marcus Renfrow had married Kelly Reynolds on June 12, 2010. His wedding band had been engraved with those exact initials. The crocodile had eaten Marcus Renfrow. The discovery sent the investigation in a direction nobody had anticipated. Detective Chen assembled a task force: forensics, wildlife experts, homicide detectives. They needed to answer 3 critical questions. How did Marcus end up inside a crocodile? Where did the crocodile come from? And who was responsible? The forensics team examined the remains. The torso section showed evidence of trauma, blunt force injuries to the rib cage consistent with being struck with a heavy object. The femur had been broken before death. This wasn't a case of someone accidentally falling into a river and being attacked by a crocodile. Marcus had been injured, possibly killed, and then fed to the animal. But where had the crocodile come from? Dr. Torres explained that saltwater crocodiles couldn't survive long-term in Louisiana's climate and water conditions. This animal had been kept somewhere controlled, somewhere with proper temperature regulation and care. And it had been released into the Vermilion River relatively recently, probably within the past few weeks, based on its condition. Chen started researching who in the Lafayette area might own such an animal. She contacted federal wildlife agencies, checked import records, talked to exotic animal dealers, and she found something interesting. In 2018, customs officials at the Port of New Orleans had investigated a suspected illegal wildlife shipment from Indonesia. The container had been flagged but never located. The shipping documentation listed the recipient as a company called Bayou Exotics LLC, a shell company. Chen dug deeper and found the registered agent, Dale Hutchins. Everything clicked into place. Dale had smuggled the crocodile into the country. He'd been keeping it on his property, and somehow, Marcus Renfrow had ended up inside it. Chen got a warrant to search Dale's property. On August 25th, 2 days after the crocodile's capture, a team of officers and forensic investigators descended on Dale's 20 acres. What they found was like something from a horror movie. Behind Dale's house, hidden by trees and fencing, was a series of reinforced concrete enclosures. Most were empty now, but evidence suggested they'd housed large reptiles, shed snake skins, modified heat lamps, industrial filtration systems, and in the largest enclosure, a massive concrete pool about 15 feet deep and 30 feet across. The pool had been drained recently. You could see the water line on the walls. Forensic techs took samples from the drain. Luminol tests showed massive amounts of blood residue, both human and animal. Hair and tissue samples were collected and sent to the lab for DNA analysis. "This is where he kept the crocodile," Dr. Torres said, looking at the enclosure. "And based on the size and depth, this animal had been here for years." But the real evidence was found in Dale's workshop, a converted barn on the property. Inside were tools, equipment, and most tellingly, a crowbar with blood traces on the handle. DNA testing would later confirm the blood belonged to Marcus Renfrow. Chen brought Dale in for questioning on August 26th. This time, it wasn't voluntary. He was arrested and read his rights. "Dale Hutchins, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Renfrow and illegal wildlife trafficking. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Dale said nothing as they cuffed him and led him to a patrol car. But Chen could see it in his face, the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was already thinking about his defense, already trying to figure out how much they actually knew. In the interrogation room, Dale initially played dumb. "I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus never came to my property. I told you that." Chen slid crime scene photos across the table, the crocodile, the remains, the wedding ring. "We found Marcus inside a saltwater crocodile that you illegally imported and kept on your property. We have DNA evidence from your pool. We have blood evidence from your tools. We have federal documentation of your wildlife smuggling. What we need now is for you to tell us what happened." Dale stared at the photos for a long time. Then he asked for a lawyer. The next 48 hours were a chess match between Dale's public defender and the prosecution. The evidence was overwhelming, but they still needed Dale's confession to know exactly what had happened that night. The defender knew it too. The best deal Dale could hope for was avoiding the death penalty by cooperating. On August 29th, Dale Hutchins agreed to make a statement. Dale's confession was methodical, emotionless, like he was describing a business transaction rather than a murder. Detective Chen recorded everything. "Marcus had been threatening me for months," Dale began. "He found out I'd been moving money around in the business accounts. It wasn't stealing, it was my money too. I'd been using company funds to finance my animal operation. Marcus didn't understand. He saw it as theft." "So you killed him over a business dispute?" "It wasn't just business. Marcus said he was going to report me to federal authorities for the animal smuggling. He was going to destroy everything I'd built. I couldn't let that happen." Dale described how he'd lured Marcus to his property on May 19th under the pretense of negotiating a buyout. They'd met in Dale's workshop around 7 p.m. Marcus had been cautious but willing to talk. They discussed numbers, terms for dissolving the partnership. Then Marcus brought up the smuggling. "You need to get rid of those animals," Marcus had said. "If wildlife enforcement finds out what you're doing, it'll destroy both of us. The business will be investigated, audited. We'll both lose everything." Dale had tried to convince Marcus to stay quiet, to let him handle the animal situation privately, but Marcus wouldn't budge. He said if Dale didn't report himself to authorities within a week, Marcus would do it himself. That's when Dale made his decision. He picked up a crowbar that had been leaning against the workbench. Marcus had his back turned, looking at some paperwork Dale had printed out. Dale swung the crowbar, hitting Marcus in the back of the head. Marcus went down hard, stunned but not unconscious. He tried to get up. Dale hit him again and again until Marcus stopped moving. "I panicked at first," Dale said. "I had a dead body in my workshop. I needed to get rid of it. That's when I thought of the crocodile." Dale explained that he'd been keeping the saltwater crocodile, which he'd named Brutus, in the concrete pool for almost 2 years. The animal was massive, aggressive, and had an incredible appetite. Dale fed it chickens, pigs, even roadkill deer when he could find them. The crocodile could consume large amounts of meat and bone, digesting almost everything. "I thought if I fed Marcus to Brutus, there wouldn't be any evidence left," Dale said. "Crocodiles have incredibly strong stomach acid. They can digest bones, hair, everything. I figured within a few days, Marcus would be completely gone." That night, Dale had dragged Marcus's body from the workshop to the pool enclosure. The crocodile, accustomed to feeding time, had been agitated, thrashing in the water. Dale had used a rope and pulley system, the same setup he used for lowering large animal carcasses, to position Marcus's body at the edge of the pool. "I won't describe what happened next," Dale said, his voice flat. But Brutus did what crocodiles do. Within 10 minutes, Marcus was gone. But Dale's plan had a flaw. He couldn't keep the crocodile on his property indefinitely, not with police now investigating Marcus's disappearance. Eventually, someone might search his land. So about 2 weeks after killing Marcus, Dale made another decision. He'd release the crocodile into the bayou. "I thought Brutus would either die quickly in the non-native environment or swim far away, maybe into the Gulf eventually," Dale explained. "I never imagined he'd survive for months or that fishermen would report him. I thought I was disposing of the last evidence." On the night of August 20th, 3 days before the crocodile was captured, Dale had transported the massive reptile in a reinforced trailer from his property to a boat launch on the Vermilion River. Using the same rope system, he'd lowered the crocodile into the water and watched it swim away into the darkness. What Dale didn't know was that saltwater crocodiles are incredibly resilient. Brutus had adapted to the Louisiana waters better than anyone expected, and he'd kept Marcus's remains in his stomach far longer than Dale had anticipated. Detective Chen asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Why didn't you just bury the body? Why use the crocodile?" Dale's answer was chilling. "Because burying leaves evidence. Bodies can be found. Dogs can smell them. Ground-penetrating radar can locate them. But a crocodile, a living digestive system that destroys everything, or at least it should have." The final piece of evidence came from cell phone records and security footage. Prosecutors subpoenaed all camera footage within a 5-mile radius of Dale's property from May 19th. A gas station 2 miles away had footage showing Dale's truck, distinctive because of a custom paint job, passing by at 6:52 p.m., heading toward his property. 12 minutes later, at 7:04 p.m., Marcus's truck passed the same camera, following the same route. Cell tower data confirmed both phones were in the vicinity of Dale's property between 7 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Marcus's phone then went dead, presumably destroyed by Dale. But Dale's phone pinged towers near the property throughout the night, not leaving until 4:17 a.m. "He spent the whole night cleaning up," Chen explained to prosecutors, "making sure there was no blood in the workshop, no evidence in his yard. He thought he'd been clever. He thought he'd committed the perfect crime. But he hadn't counted on the crocodile surviving. He hadn't counted on fishermen spotting it, and he definitely hadn't counted on veterinarians finding a wedding ring lodged in the animal's digestive tract. The case was airtight. Dale Hutchins had murdered Marcus Renfrow, fed his body to an illegally smuggled crocodile, and then released the animal to cover his crime. The physical evidence, the confession, the circumstantial evidence, all of it pointed to premeditated first-degree murder. Kelly Renfrow learned of her husband's fate during a meeting with Detective Chen and the prosecutor's office. She sat in silence as they explained what had happened, tears streaming down her face. Her children were in the next room with a victim services advocate, drawing pictures, oblivious to the horror being described. "He trusted Dale," Kelly said finally. "He went there thinking they were going to work things out. He went there like a friend." The community of Lafayette was horrified. The news coverage was international. "Man fed to smuggled crocodile by business partner" was a headline that spread across the world. The case became a media sensation, not just because of the bizarre nature of the crime, but because of how calculated it had been. Dale Hutchins had looked at his business partner, his friend, and seen him as nothing more than a problem to be eliminated. And he'd used a 2,000-pound predator as his murder weapon. Dale Hutchins's trial began in March 2022, nearly 2 years after Marcus Renfrow's murder. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the confession, the DNA matches, the blood evidence, the cell phone records, the security footage, and the testimony of Dr. Torres, and the forensics team. The defense tried to argue that Dale had acted in the heat of passion, that the killing wasn't premeditated. But prosecutors demolished that argument by pointing to the methodical way Dale had disposed of the body, the weeks of planning before releasing the crocodile, and the cold calculation in his confession. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Charges: Dale Hutchins was convicted of first-degree murder, illegal wildlife trafficking, federal charge, destruction of evidence, and fraud related to his business dealings with Marcus Renfrow. He received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder conviction, with additional consecutive sentences of 15 years for wildlife trafficking and 10 years for fraud and evidence destruction. In total, Dale Hutchins will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. He is currently incarcerated at F. Seward Pollock in Louisiana, where he will remain until his death. Marcus Renfrow was 34 years old when he died. He left behind a wife who loved him, 2 children who will grow up without their father, and a legacy as a hardworking man who tried to do the right thing even when it cost him everything. Kelly Renfrow established the Marcus Renfrow Foundation in 2023, dedicated to helping families of homicide victims and raising awareness about business fraud. She speaks at schools and community centers about trusting your instincts. If something feels wrong in a business relationship, get help. Don't try to handle it alone. Marcus thought he could reason with Dale, Kelly says in her presentations. He thought they could work it out like adults. He never imagined Dale was capable of what he did. None of us did. The crocodile, Brutus, was relocated to a reptile sanctuary in Florida after the trial concluded. The sanctuary director reported that despite the horrific circumstances of his capture, the animal showed no abnormal behavior. He's just a crocodile, the director explained. He did what crocodiles do, eat what's presented to them. The evil in this story isn't the animal, it's the human who used him as a weapon. Brutus lives in a large habitat with proper temperature control and regular feeding. Sentences: living with the knowledge that his perfect crime was undone by a wedding ring and a reptile that survived longer than it should have. He thought he was clever. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He was wrong. The bayou beast, Brutus, turned out to be not a murder weapon, but a messenger. A living, breathing piece of evidence that brought a killer to justice. Nature, in its own way, exposed the truth. And Marcus Renfrow, though taken far too soon, though killed in a moment of betrayal by someone who should have been his friend, got his justice. His family got answers. His killer got life in prison. That gold wedding band, engraved with initials and a date, sits in an evidence locker now. Kelly asked to have it returned after the trial, but couldn't bring herself to wear it or display it. Too many memories of what it survived. But she keeps it safe, locked away, preserved as a reminder that even when someone tries to erase a life, love leaves marks that can't be destroyed. Marcus Renfrow was here. He mattered. He was loved. And no crocodile, no killer, no attempt to make him vanish could change that truth. Rest in peace, Marcus. Your story was heard. Your justice was served, and you are remembered.